the previous videos, we mentioned about different types of the tenses that can appear in your thesis. These include the simple present tense, the present perfect tense, simple past tense, and simple future tense. You know that different types of the tenses have their own usage and applications. It is dependent on their purpose, providing additional information regarding the occurrence of the matters that you are stating, whether it is happening in the past, in the present, or in the future. We also give you some example sentences to demonstrate the usage of different types of the tenses. In these videos, we're going to discuss further regarding the tenses that appear in different sections of your thesis. These include the introductions, the literature review, the methodology, the research and discussions, as well as the conclusions. You know that different types of the tenses are used based on the purpose of the sentences. Therefore, you will see that there will be different types of the tenses appearing in different sections of the thesis, which different sections of the thesis are actually meant for different purposes. Also, you will see that even within these same sections, there will be more than one type of the tenses being utilized. This is very subjected to the purpose of the statement, as well as the information carried by the statements. With that, we should look into the purpose of the statements that appear in different sections of the thesis with respect to the tenses to be used, as well as providing an examples to demonstrate that. Without further ado, we shall start with the first section in your thesis, which is the introductions. Normally in the introductions, there will be a background of the study, which is meant to describe an existing situations or universal truth or the conditions and states of the topic that you are discussing. When you talk about the background of the study, most likely you are referring to the current situations, which is happening now, and these current situations, it can also be the universal truth. Therefore, you may use the simple present tense to describe those. For example, clean water is a basic human need. You know that this is currently happening, and it is a universal truth. You are stating a fact, which is commonly agreed and accepted by everyone. Or in the introductions, sometimes you are describing a state which began in the past and continue in the present. Since that the conditions is still happening in the present, and your focus of the discussions, it will be the matters that's happening in the present. Therefore, you may use the simple present tense. For example, its discovery, transport and systematic renewal has always been crucial to human societies. You are talking about something which is always happening. And next, if you are to describe the aim of your project, if the project is still currently ongoing, you may use the simple present tense. And if your project has already completed, you can use the simple past tense. These are the example sentences. The aim of this study is to. The aim of this project was to. It is very much dependent whether your project has already completed. In most of the thesis, there will be a sections to outline the structures of your thesis. That means it provide informations, giving an overview to the reader what kind of information to be provided in the following sections to the last chapters of the thesis. In this case, what you are doing now here is you are actually communicating with the readers, and the focus of the communications, it will be on that particular thesis or the paper as the readers is reading your thesis. With that, you can use the simple present tense. This is an example sentence. For example, section 1 demonstrates that. Section 2 elaborates that. The verb demonstrate and elaborates appear in the simple present tense as you are communicating with the readers. Next, let us look at the second section of your thesis, which is the literature review. You know that in these sections, you are going to present the informations as well as findings as acquired from the previous researchers from a series of the literature published previously. There will be a lot of citations of their works as well as highlighting their findings. Sometimes there will be descriptions of what they did, and you might need to correlate their research to yours. Regarding the tenses to be used in this section, again, it will be very much dependent on the purpose as well as the informations carried by the statements. Let us look into it one by one. Let's say now the information cited is generally accepted as a scientific facts. Because you are talking about a scientific facts, it is generally accepted and it is likely going to happen now and have high probability of continue happening in the future. Therefore, in this case, you can use the simple present tense. This is an example sentence. The factors that control the concentrations of aluminium in seawater are poorly known. Based on what this sentence implies, in the past, the knowledge of this was poor, which at the present, the knowledge of this is still poor. In this case, the present tense is being used. Next, when you believe that the findings reported are restricted to the specific study you are citing, you can use simple past tense. For example, Hamill 1998 found that. Based on this sentence, whichever findings as stated at the sentence here, it is actually only applicable to the study carried out by this Hamill. It was applicable then, but may not be applicable now. When you use the past tense here, that means your focus now, it will be solely within the research study by Hamill. Let's say now if you believe that the findings reported are not restricted to the specific study or have relevance to your own study, that means you can use the present perfect tense. For example, the authors here and the authors here and the authors here, there are 3 studies. They have experimentally studied the propeller wash, which in this case, you also intend to study that. You know that those studies was conducted at the past. That means the relevant study is still ongoing. You are the one to make it ongoing, and these authors initiated the studies. This come to a situation that the relevant study began at a certain unspecified time in the past, which is still ongoing now. Therefore, the tenses suitable for these conditions, it will be the present perfect tense. Next, In citations, where the focus is on the research area or several authors, present perfect tense may be used. For example, several researchers have studied the relationship or something, which at the end of the sentence there will be list of the citations, giving you informations, the relevant studies that the sentence is referring to. Because this research was carried out by different researchers at different time in the past, you know that this happened in the past, but with an unspecified time, and most likely this research shall carry on by the other researcher in the world, and probably it is highly relevant to your own study as well, which you also intend to proceed with the study. Then you may use the present perfect tense. Or if you are making a general statement that describe the level of research activity in an area, for example, much research has been done on, you may use the present perfect tense. First, your statement here is a general statement. We are talking about the research activity within an area. You know that this kind of research activity has already begun in the past, and most likely the relevant study shall continue to the present date by the researchers from all over the world. That means this kind of research is still active. Therefore, you may use the present perfect tense. Next, it will be the third section of your thesis, which is the methodology, or in the journals paper, it is normally titled by materials and methods. You know that these sections is actually describing the methodology that you have carried out in order to accomplish your research. There will be descriptions of the methods that you use, as well as the materials that you use for your research study. The usage of the tenses, it will be based on the purpose of your statements. Now that you want to describe the procedures, and if the procedures or the method used has been established by the other researcher, you may use the simple present tense, as the procedures and the method is considered well known within the research community as a scientific fact. Therefore, you may use the simple present tense. For example, our methodology consists of, and if you are to state the objective of the experiment, the equipment used, the steps follows, how the other methods were adapted, and so on and so forth. This is referring to something that has already happened. It is all about what you did. Therefore, you can use simple past tense. The example sentences are: the aim of our procedures was, we adapted the software by. It is basically referring to whichever you did in your research study. Next, we come to the result and discussions. This is the sections where we present our data and our results. There will be explanations, discussions on how do you interpret the results. You might need to provide justifications, evidence, as well as reasonings that leads to your findings. You will need to look into the purposes of the statements for you to decide the tenses to be used for these statements. Let's say now you want to state what a figure or table shows, highlights, describes, and so on. You are actually communicating with the readers. The focus of the communications, it will be the figures and tables that appear in your thesis, which is happening exactly at the instance when the readers is reading it. Therefore, you may use the simple present tense. For example, figure 4.1 shows that you are actually referring a figure showing the reader that particular figure, the informations or the message carried by the figures. Let's say now you want to discuss your results, finding, and also to state their implications, which is typically after the verbs such as show, explain, highlight, indicate, review, and so on. The simple present tense may be used. Again, what you are doing now here is you are communicating with the readers. It would be as if you are standing in front of the reader telling your findings. In this case, simple present tense will be used. The example sentence will look something like this. The finding indicates the needs for. The verb indicates is a simple present tense. Let's say now you want to talk about the actions you perform, what you found, discovered, noticed, observed, and so on. That means you are expressing something that you have done during your research study, which is actually happening in the past. Therefore, you will use the simple past tense. We observe, it was observed that, and then we look at the conclusions. When you want to outline the future works, you may use the future tense. As the work haven't happened yet, you are announcing what's going to happen next. For example, future works will investigate or focus on. The will here indicates to you it is a future tense. What you see here from different sections of your thesis or your journals paper, because of the different purposes of the statement, you will need to decide the tenses to be used. A lot of students may find this quite confusing. You will need to go back to the fundamentals of using the tenses. If we are talking about something which is facts that happens in the past, in the current, and is likely going to continue in the future, and this kind of facts is generally well known by the research community or the general public, you are going to use the simple present tense. If you are communicating with the readers, referring the things about those going to appear in your thesis, that means you can use the simple present tense. Or if you imagine yourself standing in front of the reader, explaining to him your thoughts and findings, and referring to him the figures or tables that appears in your thesis, you may use the simple present tense. However, if you are referring to something that you have done for your research study, which happened in the past, for example, what kind of equipments and materials you use, what you found or discovered, that means you're going to use the simple past tense. And if you are talking about anything is going to happen in the future, that would be the future tense. And also if you are referring to something which happened in the past without knowing a specific time, or that specific time is not relevant, or it is not traceable, and then you know that that particular things is still happening at the current state and is closely related to your study, most likely you're going to use the present perfect tense.